You know, when you think of serotonin, what comes to mind? Probably the feel-good chemical, right? The thing that helps manage our mood. But what if I told you that's not its first job? That long before it's dealing with our feelings, it's actually our body's master architect, literally building us from the ground up.
All right, so let's really dig into that. We've got a pretty good handle on what serotonin does in our adult brains, but that just opens up this really fascinating question, doesn't it? What was its very first job? I mean, what is it doing in those earliest moments of life, when an embryo is just this tiny cluster of cells starting to figure itself out?
Well, to figure that out, scientists basically had to become detectives on a molecular level. Their mission, if you will, was to find serotonin's fingerprints all over a tiny, developing mouse embryo. They needed to map out exactly where it was working and which parts of that embryo were, listening to its instructions.
Now here's the tricky part. You can't just look for serotonin itself. It's always on the move. Instead, you have to find where it lands, its docking stations. And these are called receptors. Just think of it like this. A cell is a little factory, and a receptor is a very specific loading dock. When a serotonin molecule pulls up and docks, it's delivering an order, telling that factory what to build next. So if you can find all the docking stations, you've found where all the orders are being given.
So how on earth do you find something that small? Well, the process is actually really clever. First, they take an embryo and slice it super thin, almost like paper. Then, step 2, they add these custom-made probes. Think of them like tiny, glowing tracker darts that are designed to stick only to the specific serotonin receptors they're hunting for. And finally, the big reveal. They trigger a chemical reaction that makes those probes light up. And just like that, you get this beautiful, glowing map showing precisely where every single one of those receptors is.
Okay, so after all that amazing detective work, what did the map actually show them? Was it just a random scattering of dots all over the place? Nope, not even close. What they found was basically a construction blueprint, revealing just how hands-on serotonin is in building an embryo from scratch.
And here's the proof. Take a look at this. In this image of a 9.5-day-old mouse embryo, see those dark stains? That's where one specific type of serotonin receptor, the 5-HT2A receptor, is active. And just look at where they are. They're all clustered in the most important places you could possibly imagine. The brand new brain, the spinal cord, and the heart. Just wow.
And it doesn't stop there. Look at this next receptor, 5-HT2B. The signal here is just intense. It's lighting up the cranial neural folds and the facial mesenchyma. Now those are fancy words, but they're basically the foundational building blocks for the entire head and face. So serotonin isn't just hanging around. It's right there in the thick of it, where the most delicate and complex construction is happening.
And then there's a third one, 5-HT2C, which kind of completes the picture. It shows up a little bit later in the game, but look where it is. Same critical zones, the brain, the heart, and even these little spots that are going to become teeth. What this tells us is that this isn't random. It's a perfectly timed, coordinated system, with different signals being turned on at just the right moment in just the right place. So what's the big takeaway from all these images? It's that serotonin isn't just floating around randomly in the embryo. No way. It's following a very precise, very specific blueprint. Its receptors are placed like little beacons in all the most critical construction zones, ready and waiting for their building instructions.
Okay, so seeing the blueprint is one thing. That's huge. But you know what the real test is in science? It's messing with the blueprint. What happens if those docking stations are all there, but the delivery trucks, the serotonin, are blocked from ever reaching them?
And that is the question that moves this whole thing from just observing to actually experimenting. If these receptors are so important, what happens to the whole project if they don't get their messages? The answer, as you're about to see, is pretty dramatic. All right, so the researchers put this to the test. They took mouse embryos growing in the lab and exposed them to different drugs that block these serotonin docking stations. Now, in the control group with no drugs, about 12% had some kind of malformation. That's our baseline. Blocking just one receptor, the 2A, didn't really change much. But then, they used a drug called mianserin, which blocks two of them, 2A and 2C, and boom, the malformation rate shoots up to 71%. That's a huge jump. But hold on, because that's nothing compared to what happens next with the last drug, ritonserin.
Ritonserin. This is the one that's really good at blocking that super important 5-HT2B receptor. Remember, the one for the head and face? The effect it had was just staggering. Even at a really low dose, it caused problems in 100% of the embryos.
Yeah, you heard that right.
100%, every single embryo. This wasn't just a minor issue, this was a total breakdown of the construction plan. And the fact that ritanserin, the drug that targets that 5-HT2B receptor so well, caused this, well, it pinpoints that specific pathway as being absolutely, fundamentally critical for normal development. You just can't build the embryo correctly without it.
Okay, so we've seen the map, and we've seen the chaos that happens when you block the signals. But let's bring this all home. What does this actually mean? Why should we care about this very early architectural job that serotonin has?
So let's just recap the big points. We now know that serotonin is on the job from the very beginning, building essential things like the heart, the brain, and the face. We also know that if you mess with its signals, especially the ones going to that 5-HT2B receptor, you get severe problems. So the conclusion here is pretty massive. Serotonin isn't just a mood chemical. It's a master regulator of morphogenesis. That's the scientific term for the literal shaping of a living thing.
And look, this isn't just some abstract science experiment. The researchers themselves spell out the real-world implications. This is a direct quote from their paper. Psychotropic drugs taken during pregnancy could interfere with developmental actions of 5-HT. What this research does is show us a potential biological reason how certain medications could have an impact on a developing baby.
It just totally changes how you think about a chemical you thought you knew, right? It's got this whole secret life as a master architect. And it really makes you wonder, if serotonin is doing this, what other incredible hidden jobs are our body's chemicals doing right now, completely in plain sight?